What's up, everybody? It's Clark here with an extended episode of the BOS Sports Blogcast. Starting to get excited for the upcoming NBA offseason with the Atlanta Hawks, as they have 2 first-round draft picks, as well as a $25.266 million trade exception that expires July 7th, of course, from the DeJounte Murray trade from last offseason going to the Pelicans, which creates a variety of interesting and exciting possibilities for this Atlanta Hawks roster. Today's episode, I'll be giving a full mock draft prediction for all 30 first-round selections, as well, in addition, exploring all potential offseason possibilities for the Atlanta Hawks, including which ones make the most sense to me. The NBA Conference Finals start today, Knicks Pacers, and Wednesday with Thunder Timberwolves. As Oklahoma City looks to continue the dominance they've shown in the first 2 rounds, they are looking like heavy favorites to win the NBA title this year. Of course, they'll have to get through the Minnesota Timberwolves and the winner of the Eastern Conference Finals to win that NBA Larry O'Brien Championship trophy. The first thing for Atlanta Hawks we want to look at in this upcoming offseason is the trade market, as well as the current roster, as well keeping in mind that aforementioned $25.266 million trade exception. Atlanta Hawks also have a $13.1 million trade exception created from the Bogdanovich trade to the Clippers, which involved Terrence Mann and 3 second-round picks going to the Clippers, which could be a factor later in the summer, is, of course, expiring February 6th of 2026. I think likely not to be used this offseason, as the Hawks can use the other trade exception and stash the other one to potentially use it for reinforcements ahead of the trade deadline in case someone from the roster gets injured before that time. So on the Atlanta Hawks roster for next season, we have Trae Young, Onyeka Okongwu, Terrence Mann, Georges Niang, Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson, Kobe Buffkin, Deke Krejci, all under contract for next season, and player options to be assumed on Dom Barlow, and opt-out assumed not to be used on Mo Gay, who just signed an extension. That would be a puzzling move if they were to use an opt-out his contract. As well, Daquan Plowden, he's on a 2-way contract. He signed that 2-year 2-way contract deal in December. He's on the Hawks roster on a 2-way contract for next season. That is 12 players with Daquan Plowden on that 2-way contract. And ability to place Kobe Buffkin, Mo Gay, and Dom Barlow, I believe, all in the G League as well. Still room to add several NBA players there. Of course, the roster limit of active players is 15, with ability to have 3 additional in the G League on 2-way contracts for a total of potential of 18 total players. The key construction to Atlanta Hawks offseason, I believe, are what star players are potentially available in trade this offseason. Aforementioned, they have the 2 trade exceptions, with the $25.266 million one being the most valuable one. They cannot combine the 2 trade exceptions, nor can they combine the trade exception with the player's salary. So those hoping, I did see online a take of trading Jalen Johnson for Giannis Antetokounmpo 1-for-1 there, and that cannot work. You'd have to add Terrence Mann for that to work salary-wise. That would be a simultaneous trade exception. You cannot add the non-simultaneous trade exception with Jalen Johnson's salary to make that happen. So, aforementioned, the hot name everyone is talking about is Giannis Antetokounmpo, one of the all-time greats to ever play the game, NBA basketball. So I see him landing with the San Antonio Spurs. That'd make a lot of sense for the Bucks to get Ace Bailey there with that second pick in the NBA draft, as he's very talented. We'll be talking about him in a few minutes when we get to the BOS Sports mock draft. For the Atlanta Hawks, carving out a trade would be tough salary-wise for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Be very tough. Aforementioned, we would have to see one of our fan favorites, one of my favorite players in the NBA, Jalen Johnson, likely leave in an outgoing deal, unless we were to package a bunch of players, including players such as Georges Niang, Terrence Mann, Onyeka Okongwu, and really aggregate salaries that way. That'd be an aggressive cut out of the roster. But as far as a small cut out of the roster, Jalen Johnson and Terrence Mann would work not in a simultaneous trade exception, with Giannis's contract being less than 120%, 125% over the combined aggregated salaries of Jalen Johnson and Terrence Mann. As well, the hurdle I see in the Hawks acquiring Giannis is the style of play, offense in which Quinn Snyder runs. Quinn Snyder likes a 5-out motion offense, although he did run that, what they call an abbreviated version of 5-out motion offense. Could you argue, which is really 4-out motion offense, when he put Clint Capella around the free throw line, some sets there for Atlanta Hawks before they took him out of the starting lineup. They gave up on that idea pretty fairly eventually. It's not fairly quickly, but they could do something like that with Giannis and as well the other 4 starters, especially if Onyeka is still here. And you see Jalen Johnson go out with Dyson Daniels having that stellar, much improved 3-point shot, working with Kyle Korver there. The 3-point shooting lab. That could work for Giannis as well, wouldn't count that out. But Giannis last season, he shot 20% from 3-point arc, so likely not conducive to playing the 5-out motion offense sets that Quinn Snyder likes to play. And personally, I do not like the move trading Jalen Johnson or Onyeka Okongwu in a package of other players in comparison to other moves the Hawks could make this offseason, ones I'm just about to talk about. I do have 3 player suggestions that would make a lot of interesting sense to me and potential trade market. First, a very interesting possibility. The Utah Jazz is in his last year of his contract, and that is Colin Sexton, of course, the combo guard, shooting guard. He's under contract for just under $19 million. So the Hawks could use the DeJounte Murray trade exception and trade any amount of salary from 0 to anything they'd like. With the non-simultaneous trade exception, it allows the receiving team to receive as much salary as the exception is valued at. And of course, Colin Sexton's contract being less than the DeJounte Murray trade exception, the Hawks could theoretically just trade picks for him. Although I don't think that would quite work for the Utah Jazz. I think they would want some kind of young talent coming back. And the Hawks, especially if they draft a forward or even a center in this draft, you could look at Don Barlow or Mo Gay potentially being on the outside, looking in as far as depth on the depth chart. It also depends on what the Hawks do with Georges Niang as well. So as far as Colin Sexton, aforementioned, he's the last year of his contract. So that'd be quite a gamble for the Hawks, and that would be kind of going all in on next year and maybe anticipating Trae Young not to pick up his player option or not extend past his player option and be gone in a couple seasons, as you'd be expending draft capital for 1 year of Colin Sexton, potentially a talented player. I would think something along the lines, the Utah Jazz might be interested in players such as Kobe Buffkin, Don Barlow, or Mo Gay would potentially work in a Colin Sexton trade for the Atlanta Hawks. And an option that might make more sense to do after the NBA draft, to see what the Hawks have. If they have a stellar draft and see themselves as a contender next year after the draft and can't get this next trade I'm about to suggest, which I'd much prefer done, then potentially going all in next year with Colin Sexton could potentially make some sense for Atlanta Hawks. The scenario I'd most prefer for Atlanta Hawks is for them to use that DeJounte Murray trade exception to complete a sign-and trade with the Chicago Bulls for Josh Giddey. Brian Windhorst reported earlier in the year that Josh Giddey is reported to sign around the $30 million mark, and several outlets have him signing for around 5 years, $150 million. So theoretically, if the contract was backloaded by 10%, you could get up to 5 years and $150 million in value. Use that non-simultaneous trade exception to trade for Josh Giddey, and as well still be under that trade exception value. So it would potentially work money-wise for the Hawks. Similar trade in NBA history to compare trade values of what the Hawks might have to give up to trade for Josh Giddey in a sign and trade. We look at the Malcolm Brogdon sign and trade from 2019. He was quite a stellar two-way guard at that time. He still has been up until last season. He fell off a little bit. Potentially a good comeback signing, and one that I'll be talking about later in this podcast for the Hawks. But he was involved in an interesting sign and trade between the Bucks and the Pacers in 2019, and back then, the Bucks received a protected first round lottery pick from the Pacers for Malcolm Brogdon, in addition to 2 second-round picks. And I think we can use that as a similar trade value for what the Hawks might have to give up to trade for Josh Giddey. And so the Hawks, they don't have a ton of draft picks. They have the 2026 first round, 2027 first round, no second round until 2028. So you'd probably be looking at giving up at least 2 first round picks for the Hawks. If they could stay away from this year's draft, which is loaded with front court players, then that would make it very interesting. So I would propose something on the lines of 2026, 2027 first round picks, along with the young talented players such as Kobe Buffkin or Don Barlow. And if the Bulls want a little bit more on top of that, maybe go late decade second round pick on top of that. And I think that's a pretty nice package there for the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls do not have any first round picks for this year. There's a team that's in a rebuilding process. Load up next year, even though they'll be mid to late first round picks next year, with the Hawks having their 2026 draft pick and a whole flurry of scenarios, swaps involving San Antonio and other teams. And a 2027 pick, the Hawks will get the worst of either the Bucks or the Pelicans pick, which both teams are probably not going to be that good that year. That could potentially be a pretty decent pick. So, aforementioned, backload that contract 10%. Josh Giddey potentially get that $150 million 5-year contract, come to Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks would then have a backcourt combination involving Josh Giddey, Dyson Daniels, Trae Young. And so what you look at there is a backcourt that can provide defense stopping power to any combination in the league. You look at backcourt combinations spearheaded with players such as Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby. That's a pretty nice combo. And of course, the Celtics, they had some struggles keeping up with that combo, even with their stellar defensive guards such as Derek White, Drew Holiday, and even Jaylen Brown mixing in on the guard position as well. So the Hawks could potentially have a similar look to that, a similar mold, and an even more athletic cut than that, having Dyson Daniels and Josh Giddey, larger wingspans, more active in the passing lanes. They're looking at a defensive combination of guards that is potentially even more stalwart than what the Celtics had if you add Josh Giddey to Dyson Daniels. And that's the vision that I see with this Atlanta Hawks team, especially if you have Onyeka Okongwu in the starting lineup and stretching that floor, playing his passing game, and working in that 5-out motion offense that Quinn Snyder likes as well. In the rotations, you have Josh Giddey mix in the 1 after Trae Young. He gets the team off to a hot start there, starting offensively with his shooting touch, and then you have Josh Giddey rotate in the 1. Give Trae his first rest of the game with Dyson still in there, and absolutely shut down the other team defensively. So that's kind of the vision I'm seeing with this trade and how he'd fit in the roster. As well, for Colin Sexton, as far as trading for him, Georges Niang might be interesting to the Utah Jazz as a fan favorite to bring him back, although they're still building around Lauri Markkanen. extend through the rest of the decade. They're probably looking for young pieces that potentially contribute, such as Don Barlow or Kobe Buffkin. One name to watch out for as well is Nikola Jokic. After 2 failed postseasons, reaching the conference finals after winning the championship, the Denver Nuggets have just lost to the 2 teams that are currently playing each other in the conference finals. The West is continuing to get more competitive. The Spurs, I think that they'll add Giannis Antetokounmpo, and all of a sudden you're looking at Giannis, Wemby, De'Aaron Fox team in the West, along with everything that's going on. Cooper Flag on the Dallas Mavericks. So the Denver Nuggets, they don't really have a way to keep adding talent to their team. Of course, they don't have any first-round draft picks this year, and I think they have 2 the rest of the decade as well. Russell Westbrook, as well, is leaving the team. He was a key contributor this season. The player option, just over $3 million. He's assumed to be declining that. And then after that, they're just under $200 million in projected salary, which is going to be well over the second apron, wherever that winds up being. And even if they trade away Aaron Gordon, they'd still be below, right around where the first apron is this year, and potentially below what it will be next year. Virtually handcuffing them from any significant trades or signings, that is the Denver Nuggets. And as well, 2 first-round picks for the rest of the decade, 2026 and 2028. So the Denver Nuggets, not many options for them to improve. I could potentially see them pulling the cord and moving on from Nikola Jokic. I think that's a less likely scenario than the Bucks trading Giannis, and not something that I have factored into my mock draft. But if he does become available, the Hawks should become the top suitor for him, as they could offer a very enticing trade package. And of course, that would be the same hurtful trade package that I had to mention just a minute ago for Giannis. And that would have to be fan favorite, and one of my favorite players, Jalen Johnson and Terrence Mann for Nikola Jokic, which would work out salary-wise for both the Hawks and Nuggets with the 125% simultaneous salary trade exception. It'd be a very interesting dynamic, of course, having the passing, shooting, scoring combination, Nikola Jokic. He would fit in perfectly with Quinn Snyder's 5-out motion offense, in contrast to a trade with Giannis where it might have to be altered a little bit to fit Giannis's playing style. And then you have Zachary Vesey. In both scenarios, Zachary Vesey, I see him being as athletic, a scorer and driver as Jalen Johnson was prior to his injury this season. By then the next year, he will be 20 next year and still developing physically, and certainly should prioritize that. But as far as his peak or prime as a slasher and driver, Zachary Vesey will be up there in the league with one of the best slashers and physical scorers there, I think, in the league. And the Hawks are certainly showing they've shared some workout videos and stuff, some pictures of Zachary Vesey in the offseason. Things appear to be going well. And on that trajectory, just talked about. So the Hawks, if they were to trade, and with that, he could potentially replace, with that improvement for Zachary Vesey in his slashing, he could certainly replace one day the role of Jalen Johnson. Although my preferred scenario is the Hawks add another player that is like that, and unless Nikola Jokic is available, that would have to be a very interesting trade for the Hawks to consider. And you have to just look at what picks are involved after that, as the Hawks will still need to add a few pieces to a potential roster after a Jalen Johnson, Terrence Mann swap for Nikola Jokic. It would be just over $156 million in payroll if they were to do that, and would be looking at potentially bringing back players such as Karis LeVert, using bird rights as a guard. That is, if he's priced out of the mid-level exception range. The Hawks do have this offseason their biannual exception as well that they can use, which is up to $5.134 million per year and up to 2 years. And there's a few nice guards that could potentially fall within that salary range as well. And no matter what the Hawks do in the trade market or the draft market, the top mid-level exception players remain. It's projected to be around $14.1 million next season with 5% yearly salary raises eligible. That is the mid-level exception NBA. Enticing players like Karis LeVert, D'Angelo Russell, who've already made some money in this league, potentially looking to compete for a championship, might be enticed playing for Atlanta Hawks team, especially after Nikola Jokic trade to try to load up and go all in for a 2026 NBA title for the Atlanta Hawks. So I think the Rockets will, unless they can somehow involve him in a trade, the Rockets will likely decline Fred VanVleet's player option as well. Although I wouldn't rule him out returning to the Rockets. Although that scenario would see him likely leaving, seeking one last large payday. After making $80 million last 2 seasons, could see him potentially fall in that category of players potentially looking at the joint contender on mid-level exception. Another player to watch out as far as high-end stars looking to join a contender, I would not rule out LeBron James declining his option. If the right opportunity came along, of course, huge trades such as Nikola Jokic to the Hawks, pairing Jokic with Trae Young, along with Zachary Shea, Dyson Daniels, and as they still had a little bit, such as the 13th pick still after that Jokic trade, they could add players such as Colin Murray-Boyles, and the Hawks would have a very bolsterous lineup that you could entice players from potentially declining the play options where they are. And LeBron James, they obviously had the Luka Doncic trade this season, which supposedly caught him off guard. Most analysts state that they believe that LeBron James, he's more interested in finishing his current contract with the Los Angeles Lakers than he is potentially declining that player option. But I'd say you never know with LeBron. He is always looking to add to his NBA resume and solidify himself as the greatest of all time. So if there's a opportunity such as an Atlanta Hawks team with Trae Young, Nikola Jokic, Zachary Shea, Dyson Daniels, and a nice drafted player there with a 13th overall pick, I wouldn't rule it out. LeBron James to the Hawks on mid-level exception. I think that's getting a little wild, but trying to rein things back in. So some of those players that might fall under potential biannual exception candidates for the Atlanta Hawks would be veteran and future Hall of Famer Chris Paul, who just played with the Spurs this last season. Russell Westbrook, aforementioned, he has a player option with the Nuggets, likely to decline it. Tyus Jones, he signed for a surprisingly low number last season, so that'll probably influence his market as well next year. All nice options for the Hawks to add. And, of course, if they complete a Nikola Jokic trade and sign a huge player such as LeBron James or even Karis LeVert there with that mid-level section, they might be looking at trying to add an extra point guard there, a veteran presence, especially with the injury history, Kobe Buffkin. And, unfortunately, he had to have the season-ending surgery this year. So aforementioned, moving on, my number one option for the Atlanta Hawks and the scenario that I most prefer them to do, aforementioned, is trade for Josh Giddey to Atlanta Hawks. As we explored a few options, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Josh Giddey, and Colin Sexton, using the Malcolm sign trade deal from 2019 compare value. I think we can look at as realistic option for Atlanta Hawks without taking away from their first round draft picks this season. As the Bulls, they will be looking to add, especially in next year's draft when they start having first round picks again. And that would make a roster, aforementioned, Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Josh Giddey, Zachary Shea, Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, with Josh Giddey moving to the one when Dyson Daniels stubs out. Give Trae Young early rest. Point guards, the Eastern Conference contenders from Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Halliburton, Cade Cunningham. They would all get clamped by the combo Dyson Daniels and Josh Giddey, while Trae Young, aforementioned, helps the Hawks get off to a hot start with that potential lineup. The bench would involve Kobe Buffkin, signed guard, the mid-level exception, hopefully, D'Angelo Russell, Karis LeVert, Fred VanVleet. That's maybe wishful thinking. And then the biennial exception candidates, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, Tyus Jones, Dyson Daniels, or Josh Giddey. Potentially one of them could be coming off the bench. You'd have that luxury of depth. Some lineups, you might even see them both start and have Zachary Shea come off the bench. But I think that makes a little bit less sense than having a guard come off the bench as well. You'd have the 13th overall drafted pick, which could be if the Hawks hold still at the 13th overall pick, you'd be probably hoping for Colin Murray Boyles to fall to that selection, although in my mock draft, I haven't selected before that. If the Hawks fall to 13th overall, I think at that time you have to take the player with the most upside at that point. And you might look at Thomas Sorber at that point, as he would add a very physical 4 and 5 presence for the Atlanta Hawks, as well with ball handling skills that would give the Hawks a different look. Very physical presence inside player before he got injured that I had as my favorite for the Hawks to draft. He, of course, had the season-ending foot surgery in February, and that's been a concern and why he's dropped down in the draft selections. He is projected to be available at 13. He's projected to go somewhere 15 to 20 in the first round in most mock drafts. And then along with that, Atlanta Hawks lineup with Josh Giddey, you have to sign trade. You still have the Lakers pick as well in my proposals. And with that 22nd pick, if the Hawks stand pick Pat, Danny Wolf would be an absolutely stellar selection. Although with this Josh Giddey trade, I do suggest the Hawks still trade up in the draft. And that's going to lead me to my mock draft segment in a minute. But the Hawks, the rest of their bench, aforementioned, with their starters, Trae, Dyson, Giddey, Reza Shea, Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, bench, Kobe Buffkin, one of Dyson or Giddey, whoever doesn't start, along with Vit Krejci, Kobe Buffkin, the drafted forward, the drafted center with the 13th and 22nd overall pick, Mo Gay, Terrence Mann as well, still in there in the mix at guard with this proposed roster, Georges Niang, and plus the two-way contract with Daquan Plowden would still be in there. That gives the Hawks 15 players, and from there they could just focus on signing two-way players, as the Hawks would have quite a bolsterous roster. They could, as 15 players with Daquan Plowden on the two-way contract, you sign one of those aforementioned veteran guards to the biennial exception. Tyus Jones might make a lot of sense, especially because he might be inactive a lot. Chris Paul, I'm not sure if he wants to be inactive at this stage in his career, but potentially an option, and certainly fall under the value range of what he's projected to sign for, and be a nice add and fit, I think, personality-wise with this Hawks team. He is the State Farm Chris Paul. He could play in State Farm Arena. But, of course, he'd be about the 15th man on the roster. Daquan Plowden on the 16th, a two-way contract. And the Hawks would be absolutely loaded. And with my proposals and the NBA draft, they would be almost injury-proof I feel like you'd still have a little bit of depth concerns at the 5, but about to get to that aforementioned draft segment. So if the Hawks keep Kobe Buffkin and a potential Colin Sexton or Josh Giddey trade, as we explored a little bit ago, it would not make much. It would make a lot of sense to, of course, in any scenario, if they keep him or trade him, to sign an extra point guard with aforementioned injury statuses as well. Malcolm Brogdon is another player, might be an interesting option with the biennial exception. He really struggled last year on the Wizards and has fallen on free agency boards, and might be a player who could be picked up with that biennial exception as well, and potentially a sneakily good ad. Pete Wallace as well might be a good ad on a 2-way contract for Hawks to add depth at that point guard position. These proposed trades, while they'd be nice for Atlanta Hawks, Josh Giddey might be a realistic target for the Bulls. Nikola Jokic probably pushing the fringe of reality, but he would be incredible ad for the Hawks. Colin Sexton as well, likely a player the Hawks could trade for, but aforementioned last year's contract. Dyson Daniels and Trae Young, their contracts are coming up too, so it's not like you can extend Colin Sexton after his trade. It'd be pretty tough to fit in extensions for all three of those players. But the Hawks have a very nice draft and believe as strongly in their draft prospects as I think they potentially have. And he might make sense to add for the Hawks to go on contending for a championship next year. But before I give a full preview of the NBA draft and what a nice draft to me for Atlanta Hawks look like, is pause for station identification. This is the BOS Sports Blogcast. So my preferred 2025 NBA draft scenario for the Atlanta Hawks remains the same, whether or not they can complete that hopeful sign and trade that I proposed with Josh Giddey with the Bulls. A larger piece, such as Nikola Jokic, if he does become available, and the miracle does happen of him being traded to the Hawks, it would change a lot and be impossible to predict what would be given up as far as draft capital going back. So we'll not be playing around with that scenario any longer. Going under assumption of Hawks making a modest trade with their trade exception, such as the one I proposed, I think Josh Giddey would be a nice ad for the Hawks, and within reason of the trade exception they have from DeJounte Murray, they could, aforementioned, backload that contract and get up to $150 million 5 years, while still having the 2025-2026 annual value under the DeJounte Murray trade exception, $25.266 million. The contract is backloaded by 10%. Giddey will get at least $150 million or more in that proposed contract. So here is how I'd make the Atlanta Hawks a contender for not only next season, but future seasons going on. They have this nice core: Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels. Dyson Daniels' contract, I believe, player option after next season, likely to decline it. So the Hawks will be looking at adding or re-signing him with bird rights, extending Trae Young. Jalen Johnson, you already have locked down. Onyeka and Kagu, you have a couple years of control. Potentially keep him long enough, potentially find a replacement in the draft, or extend him at some point as well, as he's a key contributor in Quinn Snyder's 5-out motion offense there with the starting lineup as the roster is currently constructed. What I propose the Hawks do is trade up from the 13th selection to secure at least one Noah Sengay or Austin Newell, two stalwart two-way forwards, athletic forwards. 6'10", Noah Sengay's listed at 6'11", for Austin Newell, a little bit more lengthy. As we experienced this season with Jalen Johnson going down to season-ending injury, as well the postseason, Celtics, Bucks having their postseasons ended with injuries. One thing can never have enough of is impact players for Atlanta Hawks, and having another athletic scoring wing on the team who could be an all-star caliber player, and Austin Newell or Noah Sengay would be huge for the Hawks. Either of those players could potentially be the best player in this draft as well, depending on how the chips lie. And this draft is very deep. Atlanta fans are already complaining about not getting selection this year draft, but Zachary Shea, he would be up there in these selections as well, as he's athletic scoring wing that we'll see with two-way capabilities, scoring, defense, passing, athletic slashing, full package, kind of like we see with Jalen Johnson. But we've seen a little bit more of a soft touch with Zachary Shea in his passing game, maybe even around the rim as well. So the only question is, what do the Hawks have that the teams ahead of them and the projected draft selections want? And that's where things get a little bit dicey. The Pelicans aren't trading with us again anytime soon. The Nets, I see as potentially a partner. They could and are mentioned as a suitor for Giannis Antetokounmpo. A lot of people believe that he's going to New York. Aforementioned, the Brooklyn Nets, they're a favorite by some analysts to land Giannis Antetokounmpo. Of course, with 4 first-round picks, having the 8th and 19th, 26th, and 27th pick, they could certainly make a very strong offer, although I still see that Dylan Harper, with the 2nd overall pick, would be a very valuable building piece for that Milwaukee Bucks team in the future. I think the Spurs and the Bucks get a deal done with Giannis Antetokounmpo. And as well for the Nets, that puts the Hawks as a potential trading partner. Having, of course, the 13th and 22nd overall pick, the Brooklyn Nets could then have a more interesting combination out of the draft of talent if they were to swap picks, the 8th and 13th overall with the Hawks, and trading up from the 27th overall position to the 22nd position, carrying Danny Wolf, getting him with Nick Claxton in there, a nice addition and nice variation looks there for in the front court at the center position for the Brooklyn Nets. It would certainly enable the Nets in future drafts to continue adding this team and add a variety of positions. There's certainly in future drafts not going to be a Danny Wolf available at 22, as this 2025 NBA draft is absolutely loaded at the front court positions, power forward and center. And as well, if they're interested in Gon Knuppel, as Jonathan Wasserman's official draft on the NBA.com website reports them taking at number 8, he could still potentially be available at 13th overall, as the teams between them, the Rockets, the Bulls, the Raptors, they can all use front court pieces, and there's elite options within that range. Austin Newell, Colin Murray-Boyles, Carter Bryant, that might all potentially make more sense for those teams than Gon Knuppel would. And even if he is selected before the Nets' 13th overall selection, there's still Liam McNeely, who is a fairly stalwart shooter as well, and would certainly provide many of the same talents as Gon Knuppel Al Duke would. So Danny Wolf, of course, he has a larger wingspan than Raynaud. The Hawks trading down to that Brooklyn Nets 27th overall pick. They will fall well within projections to land Maxime Raynaud, 7 foot 1 inch center out of France. He has a slightly smaller wingspan than Danny Wolf, but slightly taller as well. Danny Wolf out of the NBA Combine. His 3-point shot looked very smooth and something for Hawks fans to potentially salivate over getting in Kyle Korver's shot lab, how that could potentially progress. But Maxime Reynaud as well has a stalwart 3-point shot as well. I don't think you're giving up too much as well. Maxime Reynaud is noted as having a soft touch around the rim, as well as nice footwork, potentially giving Trae Young officially that 7-foot plus sure bucket under the basket as far as a passing option, dishing in the lane. That would be huge, mixing up the look in addition to Onyeka Okongwu for the Atlanta Hawks. I don't think you'll lose too much drafting Maxime Reynaud instead of Danny Wolf as far as what the Atlanta Hawks need. As far as what the Brooklyn Nets need, in addition, Nick Claxton, the front court low post presence, paint presence, Danny Wolf with the passing, 3-point shot, and a little bit of the perimeter game would give them a lot different look. And going in drafts going forward, they would be able to focus on other positions throughout the roster. So as far as the Hawks trading up to secure a talent like Noah Singay or Austin Newell, sacrificing selection for mentioned Maxime Reynaud for Danny Wolf, would not be too concerned about that swap. That is probably the best bet, as the Hawks do not want to trade both the first round picks just to trade up in the draft. The Hawks still need a center. Not many options there in free agency. Naz Reid, not likely to be within the mid-level exception range signing. You never know. The Hawks team could actually load up, and he could be interested in signing here, but I would more think a player like Naz Reid would be interested in a large payday, getting a lot of playing time somewhere, and showcasing his abilities. So could the Raptors be a partner with the Atlanta Hawks for them to move up in the 2025 NBA draft? I do not see it, as the Hawks do not have anything much other than draft capital that the Raptors could want, and that would be an overpay probably potential situation. And if the Nets do get Giannis Antetokounmpo and do not have the 8th pick available, then I would not be opposed to the Hawks trading with the Raptors to move up to secure Noah Singay at the 9th position in the NBA draft, as he's projected to be selected in NBA.com's official draft projections. For the Raptors, if the Hawks do move up there, the 8th position, I think Austin Newell would be a great player for them as well. He'd be a nice replacement, potentially, for Jakob Poeltl. He's in his last year of his contract going in this next season. And Austin Newell, he's projected to be either 4 or 5 in the NBA. He, of course, grew 2 inches out of high school between graduating his senior year and going into UGA. So potential for him to continue growing as a young man as well. And for the Rockets at the 10th pick, could the Hawks be a trade partner with them to move up in the draft? I do not see that. The Hawks are looking, after winning over 50 games last season and being bounced in the first round, they're looking to add immediate impact players. And I think if the Hawks trade up, I don't think Austin Newell or Noah Singay will be available at that 10th position. And for them, I see them drafting Colin Murray Boyles, power forward out of University of South Carolina. A draft combine listed as 6'7", potential face-up, post-up game. Great option, great impact player potential there for the Houston Rockets, selecting with the 10th overall pick. Chicago Bulls, who are 12th overall on the draft board, are projected to select Colin Murray Boyles. And for Atlanta Hawks, if they get that Josh Giddey trade done and are not able to trade up to 8 to get Noah Singay, Colin Murray Boyles would certainly be a nice player for the Atlanta Hawks, but that's not how I have the draft board line. I think the Hawks and Nets could be trade partners pretty efficiently without giving up a ton of capital, as well Josh Giddey, without completely draining the rest of the picks the rest of the decade. Although it would be looking bleak as the Hawks do not have very many going forward. As well, Jonathan Wasserman's mock draft for the Atlanta Hawks, selecting Derek Queen at 6'10". He's great ball handling and skills, soft touch around the rim, and passing as well. I do worry about how his game will translate to the physicality of the NBA. He, of course, is not only a post-up threat, but also a threat off the dribble drive with his great ball handling abilities. With the physicality of the NBA, I do worry a little bit about how his face-up game will translate. And so for the Atlanta Hawks, in selecting Derek Queen, what I'm thinking Jonathan Wasserman is potentially anticipating is a trade for the Atlanta Hawks. Of course, it was mentioned that the Hawks whiffed a few times at the deadline for Kevin Durant, and the Hawks are still a potential trade partner for Kevin Durant. It would take several players and would potentially be a lesser draft capital situation than trying to trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo or Nikola Jokic, as I mentioned previously in this episode. Kevin Durant might be looking at a package of players such as Kobe Buffkin, along with Onyeka Okongwu, Terrence Mann, Georges Niang, and that would get the Hawks within simultaneous trade exception range, within 120% of Kevin Durant's salary. And salary-wise, that would make the trade work. On top of that, I think the Suns might want maybe one first-round pick compared to what Nikola Jokic or Giannis Antetokounmpo potentially become a cost and trade if they are indeed both available. Giannis is rumored to be, Jokic not yet, but we'll see. Kevin Durant with one pick and that combination of players might be easier for the Hawks to become a contender next season. And aforementioned would investigate all potential scenarios. I think this is a little bit of a fringe scenario for the Hawks, but it would be interesting. And at 13th overall, circling back to Derek Queen, that Jonathan Wasserman selection would certainly make a lot of sense after Onyeka Okongwu would be traded in a potential scenario for Kevin Durant to the Suns. In addition to Jonathan Wasserman's pick for the Atlanta Hawks at the 22nd position, Danny Wolf. Of course, the Hawks would not have any pure center players after that Onyeka Okongwu trade, with Don Barlow and Mo Gay being both 4 or 5 considered in the front court positions. And circling back to Derek Queen, if the Hawks, of course, do not make that trade, I think a better fit than what I have in my scenarios with Hawks trading for Josh Giddey, trading up for Noah Sengay, trading back for other center in the draft, Maxime Reynaud. Derek Queen, for me, would fit in the NBA draft at the 15th position, going to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Of course, Chet Holmgren, he got injured again this season. So adding to the front court, especially at the center position, Isaiah Hartenstein's contract will be up after 2 more seasons. So they eventually need a long-term solution for him leaving as well. There will not be any Derek Queens likely available at the 15th position, future NBA drafts. Very talented, and with a soft touch and passing game, certainly seems to fit into what they have going on there with Oklahoma City Thunder. So before giving my full NBA mock draft list, I will pause again for a break and station identification. This is the BOS Sports Blogcast. Aforementioned, the Brooklyn Nets right, here we go. This is the BOS Sports first round NBA 2025 mock draft. My first 3 picks, no surprises. I got Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, 1, 2, 3. Excuse me. Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, 1, 2, 3. The only difference that I have in most mock drafts is I have the Milwaukee Bucks and San Antonio Spurs swapping picks there. I think Giannis Antetokounmpo would be absolutely stellar add to pair alongside Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox. Victor Wembanyama, he's already reaching his prime right now. It's time to go all in, I believe, with him, as you never know what can happen. You saw with Tim Duncan, he had some injuries there that prevented that San Antonio Spurs team from really being the best team all time there, along with the drama they had with, of course, off-court drama. So 1, 2, 3, that is currently the Spurs number 2. The Mavericks, surprise, number 1. After having those record low odds, they get Cooper Flagg. Most certainly. Number 2 will be Dylan Harper going to the Bucks. And number 3, Ace Bailey going to the 76ers. The Bucks, they will get Dylan Harper to build around for future seasons, as well as probably some future draft capital as well from the Spurs. I do not see the Spurs giving up their I think they have the 14th pick as well. We're going to get to that in just a minute, as I have all 30 selections there for this NBA draft. The Spurs are a bidder in the potential Giannis Antetokounmpo trade, which I have them pulling off. With Wemby's outside game, be a formidable big 3 in San Antonio, of course. Dylan Harper being selected by the Bucks. Damian Lillard, of course, he'll be returning from the Achilles injury towards the next season or the season after. He's going to be making around $60 million each of the next 2 seasons. Although he does have a player option, not for this season, but the season after. So likely he'll be staying there with the Bucks as well. Ace Bailey to the 76ers. That'll be interesting. Will there'll be any movement with Joel Embiid? Before we get to the rest of the selections, going to pause really quick for station identification. This is BOS Sports Blogcast. The next surprise I have in the draft comes at selection 4. And this is where my mock draft starts to vary from other people's, as I do not agree with the Ball brothers. I don't agree with Lonzo Ball. I think LaMelo Ball is staying there in Charlotte, and it'd be very enticing to add center Kaman Malik along with Lonzo Ball. He'd have a steady force, stalwart force in the paint. We saw Kaman Malik there in the ACC tournament. Several teams sent as many as 3 guys to box him out at times. That would give LaMelo Ball a stellar paint scorer and presence, and start the Charlotte Hornets start looking like a roster. They start building pieces around and potentially have a winning playoff season. Alongside Mikal Bridges as well. From there, the Hawks just need the Hornets. They just need to clean up their role players. The Nurkic trade did not make a whole bunch of sense to me, though he could potentially be an outgoing piece for them to build around as well. One interesting thing to note is Ball is no longer on the ESPN's depth chart, so maybe Lonzo Ball's prediction is already a done deal. Maybe he already knows that something's going to happen. It would have to be a 3-team trade for it to be a done deal, as the Spurs swapping their second pick, get at least the Hornets pick back. That is, if he goes to the Clippers, it would not quite make a whole lot of sense there. I think it would have to be a 3-team trade involving the picks as well. For the Utah Jazz in the 5th overall selection, I like Trae Johnson over VJ Ezkomi, who would be still available on the board. Of course, after the surprise pick, it came in Mullet to the Hornets, which I have. And Trae Johnson, I like for the Utah Jazz. 6'6", more athletic than they already have in their look with Colin Sexton. The Utah Jazz, they get a little bit more lengthy in their backcourt defense, which might help their defensive woes there for the Jazz as well. He's a great scorer, is Trae Johnson. Score off the dribble, create his own shots, and would certainly replace much of those same qualities that they enjoy from Colin Sexton there, as Sexton is on his expiring contract in his last year. My next surprise, at number 6, I have the Washington Wizards selecting Kasparas Jonas as last remaining elite combo guard in the draft at 6'6", point guard, shooting guard. The Wizards then start putting together a combination of guards, kind of like I was envisioning with the Hawks playing the sign trade for Josh Giddey, having Dyson Daniels and Josh Giddey on the same tree. They now would have Kasparas Jonas along with Bob Carrington, Jordan Poole as well, another combo guard. And the Wizards would start being able to do some interesting things there in their backcourt, along with Alex Sarr, first round pick from last season. And who knows, maybe they even convince Chris Middleton to stay and accept his player option. All of a sudden, the Wizards start looking like a competitive, nice roster there with that combination of guards. So I really would like them. I really think that they have to look at upside of Josh Jonas and what he can bring as a 6'6" potential the last athletic combo guard who could maybe bring some Cade Cunningham like scoring touch and ability to that, slashing ability to that Wizards team. Of course, he probably won't be as physical of a slasher as we've seen Cade Cunningham be, but never know. He's 6'6". He certainly has a frame to do so. And I see him as a fit with that Washington Wizards team. The New Orleans Pelicans, they have the 7th overall pick, and they have a need at nearly every position on the roster. Of course, they already have Jose Alvarado, DeJounte Murray. He'll be returning at some point next season as well. And they have Zion Williamson as well. But really looking depth-wise, they could add to any of their positions. And VJ Edgecombe would make a lot of sense for them. If the Hornets do, in fact, trade Kaman Mullet. And so Edgecombe, he would add to that guard core with Jordan Hawkins, Jose Alvarado, DeJounte Murray. And just like the Wizards we just talked about, now they start having a guard combination, rotation of guards that starts to look like something enticing to add, of course, with Zion Williamson there in the paint. The Nets, they have the 8th overall pick right now, and as I mentioned earlier in this episode, I want them to be a trade partner with the Hawks, and the Nets are a favorite to land Giannis Antetokounmpo, as previously mentioned, but I still think the Spurs will have the better option to trade for the Nets. And so for the Bucks, for the Nets, if they cannot secure Giannis, it then makes sense for them to leverage their picks to get themselves in better position in the draft with those later draft picks. They have the 26th, 27th pick, as well as the 19th pick, and then this 8th overall pick. With the 26th and if you were to space out those picks a little bit more modestly with how the selections lie, the projected selections lie, the Nets could really add some nice pieces in this draft going forward. And so I would have them trade with the Atlanta Hawks. And if they're interested in adding a shooter like Gon Neppel, I think he still could potentially be available at 13th with the needs of the Hawks drafting at 8th, Raptors, Bulls, and Rockets being in between them. And then if he's selected, he could pivot to Liam McNeely, who would add a lot of the similar options as well. I have him selecting the player out of Russia. I think he played some NCAA ball with their 19th overall, 20th or 19th overall pick. We'll get into that in a minute. Right now we're focusing on the 8th overall pick. And like that to go to the Hawks. And for the Hawks to then draft Noah Singay with that pick. As said about a dozen times so far. That would give them, of course, this 22nd overall pick, aforementioned Nick Claxton, Danny Wolf. Nice combination of centers there. Give them a lot of options to fill out the roster in future years. And they'll still probably be in the lottery again next year. So even with a nice bolster of these combination of drafted players. Toronto Raptors, 9th overall, after Atlanta Hawks trade up to 8th overall pick with the Nets and take Noah Singay, who I think would be a nice fit for the Toronto Raptors. I think the Raptors piss it. Austin Newell, he'll bring a lot of the similar qualities as Noah Singay will, but with a little bit more lengthy frame. And as well, he can play a little bit of 5 as well, projected as a 4-5 combination in the NBA. Jakob Poeltl is on his last year of his contract, and Austin Newell could potentially fit in those plans, replacing him at the 5 year after this coming season. 2025-2026, the upcoming season. So, 10th overall pick, I see the Houston Rockets selecting Colin Murray-Boyles. He's a heck of a two-way player. As power forward there at 6'7", inside scoring presence. On defense, he would certainly bolster the Rockets' hopes to improve in the postseason after the first round exit this year. Portland Trail Blazers, another surprise pick. I have them selecting Thomas Sorber. Of course, there's a lot of injury concerns. Aforementioned, he had the surgery in February, and he's fallen in a lot of draft boards, but Portland Trail Blazers, Thomas Sorber, he seems to fit their big man mold that they like to tend to draft in as well. He has a lot of upside. He was my number 1 pick for the Hawks before he got injured. So now for the Hawks, I like Noah Singay a lot better. But Thomas Sorber, and if he's still available at 13th overall pick, that would be my top pick for the Hawks as well. He has ball handling abilities at nearly 7 feet. Does Thomas Sorber and play face up, back to basket, absolute force in the paint. I'd compare him a little bit to the games of both Onyeka Okongwu and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think we could see a combination of the scoring, passing, ball handling abilities with the presence as well inside the paint. So, next pick, 12th overall. I have the Bulls selecting Carter Bryant, athletic wing player, 6'8". If the Bulls plan to keep Josh Giddey or not, sign trade. I like adding a nice athletic wing and shot making abilities to pair along with Vucevic. Of course, Vucevic, he struggles at times on defense, having Carter Bryant's long wingspan long in there for the Chicago Bulls would solve some defensive problems there. So, Nets, 13th overall, after their swap with the Atlanta Hawks. And I see non-Nepal falling to that, as I don't see the Bulls. I see Carter Bryant being more valuable to the Bulls. They need a little bit more defense than that shot making, which Gon Nepal is going to be providing. And so, I don't think if the Nets went Gon Nepal, as John Wasserman's draft suggests, I don't think falling back in the draft hurts them very much there for the Nets. And trading up from the 27th pick to get Danny Wolf, 27th overall from the Hawks pick, I think that's a good swap for both the Nets and the Hawks and what they need in the rosters. Fourteenth overall, Liam McNeely, and he might not be there if the non-Nepal's already off the board. Nets, if they were to trade back, you'd have to think, and if they're targeting a shooter, you'd think they'd have to pivot then to Liam McNeely. Be great shooter available. And previous mock drafts, he's at times been linked to the Atlanta Hawks. That'd certainly be interesting in Kyle Korver's shot lab, but how would the Hawks play him? At that point, he would be a backup forward and playing about 20 minutes a game for 13th overall pick. I think the Hawks should be aiming a little bit higher on what they could potentially be taking out of this draft. But for the San Antonio Spurs with the 14th overall pick, and after trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo with their second overall pick, Liam McNeely would make a heck of a lot of sense for the San Antonio Spurs. You have Aaron Fox, Liam McNeely, play both a little bit 2 and 3 as well. Giannis Antetokounmpo, Victor Wembanyama. A lot of rumors Stephon Castle would be out on that proposed roster. That'd certainly be starting to look like a contending team next season for the San Antonio Spurs. So, 15th overall, Derek Queen, eventual replacement for Isaiah Hartenstein. Aforementioned, would make a lot of sense for Thunder keep adding to their front court in case of more Chet Holmgren injuries in the future. So, 16th overall pick, Orlando Magic. I got him selecting the French guard Nolan Traore, whose three-point shooting prowess has been noted, including in NBA.com's mock draft. And shot-making abilities from beyond the arc is exactly what the Orlando Magic need. And they need it in bunches, and Nolan Traore is a potential solution to that, and makes a lot of sense for them to make that selection there with him available. Jace Richardson, 17th overall to Timberwolves. He makes a lot of sense to replace Nickeil Alexander-Walker for the Minnesota Timberwolves, as Nickeil Alexander-Walker's contract expires after the end of the season, and see him at times a little bit as a weak link in that Timberwolves team. Moving on, 18th overall, I have a little bit of trade up, a little bit of a interesting thing as well. Will Riley goes a little bit selections ahead of where he's projected in some drafts. Athletic wing. And for the Wizards, I see them adding both my previous selection prediction with Jaspas Jassionis as well as Will Riley. All of a sudden, the Wizards just added 2 potentially stalwart two-way players at the guard, combo guard, and forward positions that fill out a lot of roster needs immediately for the Washington Wizards and what they already have with Alex Sarr, Bub Carrington, Jordan Poole, and players like that. Marcus Smart as well, don't forget, he's still there after the Grizzlies traded him. And so that would be a very stalwart backcourt that they would have there. Mix in Will Riley, you then add some athleticism to the front court. In addition to Alex Sarr, Wizards are starting to look like a nice roster, I think, with those selections. Brooklyn Nets, 19th overall pick. Aforementioned, they have 4 first-round picks. Igor Dimin seems like a net sensation. He can play 1, 2, and 3. He's a little bit like Vit Krejci, a little bit more lengthy, a little bit taller than Vit Krejci at 6'9". But seems like a player that would appeal to Nets fans as well. He'd be very functional. The roster could certainly use a player like that. I think he could be a Nets fan favorite as well. So I'd have Igor Dimin going to the New Jersey. Haven't been to New Jersey in a while. Brooklyn Nets at 19th overall. Miami Heat, 20th overall selection. I have them selecting Walter Clayton Jr., a nice combo guard, a little bit shorter. I believe he's 6'3 or 6'4 listed at. Davion Mitchell is not contracted for next season. And as well, he was a little bit of a weak link there for that Miami Heat team. Heat likely to move on from Davion Mitchell, and Walter Clayton Jr. would be an interesting prospect to pick up in the draft to replace him going forward. Jazz, 21st overall, Neat Clifford. Jazz adding a two-way forward with Trey Johnson in the draft would be a game changer for him. You start looking at Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, Neat Clifford in the mix at the 3 position. They as well have Trey Johnson at the 2, Jordan Clarkson potentially at the 1, or maybe they sign one of those veteran point guards who are out there in free agency this year. They might be a candidate for Fred VanVleet if he opts out of his contract with the Utah Jazz. That'd be an interesting team. Fred VanVleet, Trae Johnson, Nate Clifford, Walker Kessler, Larry Markin. They're starting to look like a playoff team again with a kind of lineup like that. So 21st overall, Nate Clifford seems to make a lot of sense to me with the Jazz 21st overall pick. New Jersey Nets, 22nd overall. After that proposed Atlanta Hawks trade, flipping, of course, the 13th and 8th seed pick and the 22nd and 27th pick between the Hawks and the Nets in 2025. The Nets would then land Danny Wolf to complement Nick Claxton at their 5. Give them a lot of versatility going forward. There will not be many Danny Wolves available at 22nd overall in future draft, as this draft is absolutely loaded in the front court. 23rd overall, another front court player for the Pacers, Joan Behringer. Nice upside center to back up Miles Turner if he moves on this offseason, or to pair with him. As Miles Turner, he plays a little bit on the outside. Joan Behringer is not known to have much perimeter offensive skills, is noted to have raw offensive skills, in fact. So be a little bit a different look for the Pacers in addition to Miles Turner if they keep both those players and draft well. 24th overall, the Oklahoma City Thunder select Cedric Coward. Oklahoma City continues to add intriguing upside, athletic combo forward out of Duke. He did not play many games this season, but he has all the athletic tools and has impressed in workouts. Be a potential steal for this Oklahoma City Thunder team, who continues to add athletic combo forward wings with a lot of upside to Jalen Williams, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren, the rest of their core. 25th overall, Orlando Magic select Drake Powell. 26th overall, Brooklyn Nets select Rasheer Fleming, 6'9", 240 point guard out of power forward out of St. Joseph's. 27th overall, with the aforementioned proposed Hawks and Nets trade, Hawks swap their 22nd pick for the Nets' 27th overall pick. Still land a nice center after having to give up Danny Wolf to the Nets. The Hawks land Maxime Reynaud, a 7'1", 250-pound center with three-point shooting range, a soft touch around the rim, perfectly complementing, giving the Hawks another look along with Onyeka Okongwu. 28th overall, the Celtics select Noah Pende, athletic forward with a lot of upside, to shoot three-point and shot blocking ability, already noted as being a capable 3 and D player. Seemed like a perfect match for the Celtics and give them options going forward in their front court, along with Jason Tatum. Of course, he's going to be out with injury. And so for the Boston Celtics, they also have the 32nd overall pick, and they're losing Al Horford and Luke Cornett, potentially. Very likely. They're projected to have, I believe, a payroll of $222 million next season. And so that's going to be well over the second apron. They could potentially keep one player on an expiring contract with bird rights. So for the Celtics, make a lot of sense to me for them to draft Noah Penda, an athletic wing, in an international ball. Not much known about, not a whole bunch of information as we get on, such as Noah Senge, a more known prospect, but still a lot of upside and potential fit as 3-and-D player, or maybe even better for the Celtics one day. And with the 32nd overall pick, I'd have them select Ryan Kalkbrenner, 3-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year out of Creighton as well, giving them a center replacement, Luke Cornett, now Horford. He's got a nice three-point shot there. I think would fit well into Joe Mazzulla's 5-out motion offense sets as well. Provide some inside scoring as well. Hopefully they explore that more next season. So 29th overall pick have Ben Siroff being selected. A 6'5" point guard playing international ball. with a lot of upside for the Suns. Make a lot of sense to take some ball handling pressure off of Devin Booker and play a little bit more off the ball, a little bit more of a shooting guard role in certain offensive situations. And Ben Seroff, a lot of upside at 6'5". 30th overall selection have Clippers selecting Taha Pettiford, best player available after he slides maybe a couple selections there, as he is projected to go maybe a selection or two higher on some mock drafts. So, notable second round selections. Did not do a second round mock draft. There's a lot of hairy and a little bit less familiar with the prospects. There's some that I recognize as they were in NBA mock drafts the first round and previous mock drafts. Brian Kalkbrenner was at times in the first round. A lot of players superseded him though. But Baron Philon last December, he was pretty high up there in the mock drafts. I think he was in the top 20, and he's now fallen off second round. He might be an enticing pick for a team. Tyrese Proctor, another guard, I believe with a lot of upside there in the second round. Joni Broom, he was projected at one time late first round, but there's been a lot of interesting players, even Noah Pinda coming out of nowhere, international ball, usurping him in the standings. Rocco Zikarsky, 7-foot center as well from Australia. A lot of raw tools, but he was up there in that first round early last season, being over 7 foot. And before players such as Maxime Reynaud came in and superseded him in NBA mock drafts. He's there in the late second round. Who knows with development these days in the G League, and with that, with those physical attributes, potentially be a stalwart NBA player, maybe even a star one day. But as the draft boards have him, it's looking unlikely. So before heading out, I'm going to take one last break, station identification, before I summarize the Hawks offseason scenarios as laid out in this episode. This is BOS Sports Blogcast. So my dream offseason, as I've laid out through the course of this episode for Atlanta Hawks, is for them to complete a sign and trade deal for Josh Giddey with the Chicago Bulls, and as well trade up the Brooklyn Nets with the 8th and 27th overall pick. Do a first round pick exchange, trading up with their 13th overall pick, the Hawks, to the Nets 8th. And as well, trading down 22nd and 27th over to get the Brooklyn Nets 27th overall pick. With those selections, I'd like them to select Noah Senge and Maxime Reynaud. Would be a heck of a haul for Atlanta Hawks in the draft. They'd have a combination of athletic guards, Dyson Daniels, Josh Giddey. They can play with any in the league, including the Celtics, who have that great combination of Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and Drew Holiday. The Hawks, all of a sudden, Trae Young, Josh Giddey, Dyson Daniels, they have two players who can shut them down defensively, and Trae Young can ignite the offense as well. Josh Giddey can come in and give him the first rest of the game, and as well create a stellar defensive lineup for the Hawks and Trae Young's resting minutes. Noah Senge, he would be another athletic forward, along with Jalen Johnson and Zachary Richer. The Hawks would be in much better position than they were this season if a player such as Jalen Johnson were to get injured. And we see that happening every year in the playoffs, that through the Celtics potentially off course. Of course, losing Jason Tatum to a torn Achilles heel. So the Hawks, they load up Noah Senge, another all-star potential athletic wing, and they would have an unparalleled combination between Zachary Richer, Jalen Johnson, and Noah Senge of athletic forwards in the league. As well, Maxime Reynaud be a nice I'd potentially like Danny Wolf better as a fit for the Hawks, but I don't think you're going to lose much with Maxime Reynaud and trading down and securing him instead. And might even be more solid in the paint as scorer, as some have noted, with his footwork and soft touch. The Josh Giddey sign and trade would have to be used with the DeJounte Murray trade exception, with the value of $225,266,266 value. The Josh Giddey's projected contract is to be 5 years, $150 million. So the Hawks and Bulls will have to work out a backload, 10% backload. Will get Josh Giddey up to 5 years, $150 million, while staying under the $25,266,266 for next season. So all these are very possible scenarios for the Atlanta Hawks. You can likely get Giddey, and likely make those trade ups, and still have something the rest of this decade as far as draft picks. Who knows? They could offload Georges Niang as well. He does not quite make as much sense with the roster anymore. He's pretty much unplayable in the playoffs as a defensive liability, and so he'd be mostly a regular season player, but potentially enticing for another team with his shot-making abilities. And the Hawks potentially reclaim a little bit of draft capital, trading him away after securing Josh Giddey and trading up with the Nets to secure Noah Senge at number 8 in the draft, this year's draft. The rest of the Hawks roster, Terrence Mann would still be on the roster. You have Dyson Daniels, Vit Krejci, Onyeka Okongwu, Jalen Johnson, Daquan Plowden on two-way contract as well. You'd like to sign either to mid-level exception or biannual exception another backup point guard with injuries, unfortunately, to Kobe Buffkin, but he's still in the mix as well. And so you're looking at a very stalwart team overall for the Atlanta Hawks, and a team that I believe be up there in championship contention as far as next year. If the Hawks cannot secure Josh Giddey and trade, but are able to make the trade with the Nets to secure Noah Senge, Colin Sexton then starts making a little bit of sense for the Hawks. Although Noah Senge, he's going to be just turning 19 sometime next year. So just like Zachary Richey was this year, he's going to be likely to be 1 to 2, at least one season of development before we see him in full force. So making a trade for Colin Sexton, whose contract expires next year, might not make sense, but if the Hawks draft Noah Senge and are impressed right away with his and how he will be his potential for next year, then they have until July 7th to make that decision with the DeJounte Murray trade exception expiring then. So before we head out, the Hawks as well, they're looking for a new GM, but may stand pat with current interim GM, Anzi Slay, who took over for Landry Fields, who was fired. We'll repost any news as it comes along. Whoever they decide to get does not change who I think is best for the Hawks team as far as drafting and potential trades in the league. So be sure to stream previous episodes of BOS Sports Blogcast. Be sure to stream Bar Soap Music on Spotify. And see you again soon with some Braves content.